So rather than read to you a bio of each of these very skilled folks, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about what patient experience really means to them and what their organizations are doing in that arena. I'm just going to start on the end here with Dave. Would you mind starting us off, Dave?
No problem. Stand up. Or
Microphone, just turn those on, guys.
Testing, testing. Good afternoon. My name is David Shook. I'm with Imprivata. Current role is I'm the patient secure specialist for the Western U.S. Patient Secure, for those of you that are not familiar, is a palm vein biometric solution that is used to positively identify a patient when they show up for treatment at a healthcare organization, whether that's checking in for a pre-scheduled examination, coming in for a appointment at the hospital, going into the emergency department. The goal is ultimately to make sure that we tie a unique person to a unique electronic medical record, eliminate merging of records to improve patient safety and basically just the patient experience. Imprivata has some other solutions around single sign-on, strong authentication, but that really doesn't get into patient experience play. So that's why I'm here, is all about positive identity. This is what I think we'll see as healthcare continues on next 10, 15 years, whether it's regional databases of patients, whether it's national databases of patients. We're actually working with some government grants on tracking homeless as they move through the continuum of care in county agencies. So there's a lot of different things, but those will ultimately be tied to biometrics to eliminate fraud and mistakes.
Thank you, Dave. And I do want to point out we had a last-minute cancellation by one of our panelists who couldn't make the travel arrangements. So, Dave, we appreciate you jumping in. And his organization has been a long-time sponsor of the SoCal chapter of HIMSS. So thanks, Dave. Karen?
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Kennedy, as you've met me throughout the morning. And I come to you, as probably most of you have seen, a nurse with just enough IT to kind of get themselves in trouble. You start off as an educator because maybe you wanted to change some things on the floor to help out your nurse cohorts, and then before you know it, fast forward 20 plus years, and my role right now is my first time on a vendor side and working in a company called TigerText. And TigerText started out as in their baby steps of secured messaging, so one-on-one secure messaging. So if you can text, you can utilize TigerText. And we found that nurses and doctors needed to communicate, and sometimes you knew their phone number anyway, and we were honestly just communicating with them by texting them unsecurely. So that's what the company starts out as. And then having me in the role of their director of clinical informatics, I start looking more at, of course, of a patient-centric role. And so I think the future is also, like we've mentioned here, a lot of time patient-centered care, but if we don't care for our providers and look at nurse burnout, physician burnout, and all the different steps that we have to do in order to care for our patient, we will miss a big boat of that patient experience. So you have to have time spent at the bedside. So anytime a new product was offered when I was on the hospital side, I would always think in the back of my brain, and I want you guys to think, if you're in meetings and vendors are coming into you, ask yourselves, is this something that's going to take my staff away from the patient's bedside? And if you're thinking about, is that a yes or a no, that's the kind of product that you want to go towards. You run towards those ones that are going to keep your clinicians at the bedside. And so that's my platform, is always a clinician advocate as well as a patient advocate.
I'm Martha Lawrence, and the CEO of a company called Ascendo Wave, but that's not really where I started on the technology side. I spent the lion's share of my career at Hospital Corporation of America. I was with HCA for almost 18 years, and brought HCA a technology which they incubated. We had $1 billion division of the company serve as our executive sponsor. We had 4 medical directors working on it for 2 years, guiding us to what we released in the marketplace 2 years ago. Samsung and AT&T are collaborators as well. In fact, we were at HIMSS in Orlando in Samsung's booth this last year. In the prior year, we were in the AT&T booth. So our technology is an artificial intelligence technology, and what we're doing is we're measuring discomfort and monitoring discomfort in the hospital, in the acute care setting. We've had 15,000 patients use the technology in an acute care setting in a variety of departments, basically every department other than ICU. And I actually, not that I'm going to do a demo, but I brought it so that you could, because people are like, what is that? Like, what are you describing? So it's an EEG headband that's paired with a Samsung tablet where the patients see their brain waves at the bottom of the screen. It lights up the pain scale on how it thinks they're feeling. HCA had us create a nausea scale, so we've got a nausea scale for the first time in our hospitals. And then we've got all kinds of cool content, some of which changes based on brain waves. So whatever is calming you down and relaxing you in the hospital, you start to see more of that content to try to keep you in a lower state of distress. So from a linkage perspective in terms of Ascendo Wave and the patient experience, I would tell you that the number one reason that patients access healthcare is because of pain. And if you're in a hospital setting, and I've spent years in a hospital setting and spent a lot of time in the hospitals today, I probably visit between 50 and 100 rooms a week. On the whiteboard, across from the patient's bed, in the little box that says, what's important to you today? It's pain control and pain management, and that's really been our focus.
You just hang on to it. Mo?
Hi, everybody. I'm Mo. Is it on? Awesome. Okay. I work for a company called Heart, and we have a platform that basically aggregates data in healthcare. So when you guys hear about Epics and Cerners and Allscripts and how you kind of make that data work together, that's what our platform does. It sits in the middle. It makes all the data flow bidirectionally together and keeps them all in sync. So we help create things like CINs, ACOs, and I think that really ties heavily into the patient experience from a different perspective. It's about this, what we call like data liquidity. I have a friend who has known what I do for 6 years and recently had a quadruple bypass surgery. And for the first time, he called me and said, I finally get what you do because I had more information on my app that you made than my doctor. And that was the power of it, right? And you're not going to do that because you're going to go to one central EMR. It shouldn't be costly. And so our platform sits in the middle and aggregates all that data. So to me, patient experience is empowerment, right? How do you enable people? How do you empower them? And that's actually our vision. How do you make people aware of their health? So.
Clark, I think I did the Faux Pas 101. I never introduced myself and spoke to you several times. My name is Jean McNerney. So hello. I'm with KPMG's Healthcare Management Consulting Group, which means I have a really fun job. Many of you would think working with auditors, tax, risk, and the like, CPAs, how is that fun? But I get to work with cross-functional teams in healthcare and have for as long as Ms. Clarall's not gonna tell you. So Clark had hair when I met him.
More than one. More than one.
But across the board, what we are focused on, what we see as a firm, is healthcare systems, doctors, groups, companies struggling with organizational change. Struggling with, as Dr. Sharif said this morning, the soft stuff, which is the cultural change. How do I get my employees to actually say 2 more words that will make someone maybe smile or at least feel a little better in the course of their day, so that my doctors are actually engaged? How do I engage the millennial nurses? Karen, the way that you want to see your data is different than the way that I want to see it. It's definitely different than the way that my mother wants to see it. And being in that sandwich generation, it's important that we are aware that there are multiple facets, because none of us are going to stop disruption. And engaging all of us to engage a patient, it's just something I've been passionate about. I like to do things that help good people save other people's lives. So that's why I'm here, and that's it.
So, Gene, great comments by all of the panelists. As you look up here, Martha's got this great small tablet. She's got the device. Mo has been taking notes all day. Everybody's got their smartphone. And as you think about technology today, when was the last time any of us called a travel agent to book an airline ticket or a hotel or a rental car? Unless you've got a brother or a sister that owns a travel agency, you're probably not doing that. You saw my beautiful 5-year-old granddaughter a couple of times today. She knows how to load her games on her tablet, navigate all of the various screens. So there is a massive demand from our consumers for technology the way they like to use it. Healthcare has struggled with that. There was mention by one of the panelists about the checkbox that's in the room. Too often, in an attempt to do the right thing as a healthcare organization, we'll implement something. Dr. Longhurst mentioned we don't focus on the outcomes, so we check the box to basically say we implemented this. I'll open this to all of the panelists. How do we bridge that gap? How do we get healthcare organizations to understand that they're running behind the times and they can leverage technology in other industries to bridge that gap better than they do? Mo, would you like to start? I have a feeling you have an opinion.
Never. Wow, okay. So there's so many thoughts. I'm trying to figure out where I want to start with this. Technology isn't always the answer, right? Like, I think we've heard the panelists or speakers say this earlier today, right? And I think actually the problem is technology has hurt healthcare more than it's helped healthcare. And I'm not even talking just about the point of care. There's so many facets that have to change for technology to really work in healthcare, right? So, when you think about, my brother recently had a kid, and I was sitting in the room watching a nurse that walked in, trying to open up the EMR to write something. I think 3 seconds in, she gave up, wrote it on a piece of paper, and put it in the drawer and left. And I was thinking, okay, I hope that wasn't anything urgent, because I'm thinking nobody else is going to see that, right? So I think, when you think about that, have we struggled with technology in healthcare? I think that technology in healthcare hasn't been deployed right. I think that the people providing technology are not out to really help healthcare. I mean, when you think about Google and why it failed and all that, there's a reason. The reason is they come in as engineers not understanding healthcare. So my background's all technology. I spent many times in the hospital with doctors. If you can't talk to a doctor about why he should have a PRN order, you shouldn't be developing technology that addresses anything around ordering. And I think that's a fundamental problem. We never spent time as technologists understanding what was happening, so all we did was take a file and copy it. I think that's a fundamental issue. And then also technology is a reaction in healthcare, meaning, the government's gonna give us money, let's get healthcare records, right? Oh, we're gonna lose money if we don't have this, so it's very reactive. And our workflows don't really, at one time I got told by somebody very famous in healthcare, it's all about workflow, stupid. So I remember that, because if it doesn't work in the workflow, and I think so I think it's not a technology challenge. Technology is there. Yes, we've shown this in other industries. There's a little bit of disbelief in healthcare, because it's not that healthcare actually hasn't tried to adopt technology. I think this is also a big fallacy that we have, that we think healthcare is behind the times. Actually, they've tried. HIE was supposed to do what our company is. I mean, these are all things we've tried. It's just the problem, and I don't think the challenge is complex. I think that there are other operational challenges that nobody thinks about. They think, oh, well, we have the tech, we can plug it in, and we're good to go. But sorry.
Martha?
No, I would offer sort of three things.
I gotta go.
Sort of, one is the collaboration piece, which I think you touched upon, and that is really understanding your stakeholder community, so that when you deploy something, it's not a nice little gadget, but it really has a very clear value proposition, and everybody understands how to measure it. Two, and I think you touched upon this as well, but I think I want to highlight it, and that's the deployment piece. I mean, we've got a lot of pilot fatigue going on, and I would tell you that there really is a secret sauce to deploying within a healthcare system. I've done this a variety of times, and I know that, and have taught a class actually for HealthBox for some of their companies on it. We just don't tell them what it is. So they arrive and they're very high maintenance. So I think that it's really on both sides. I'm not sure that the technology companies really understand all of the things they need to be successful, but on the health system side, I'm not sure that we've really articulated all of our needs really well. And I feel like I can speak to this, having been in a hospital system for a lot of years and now being an entrepreneur for 9 years. I'm seeing both sides of the equation and where I think there's some opportunities to improve. And then the third thing around workflow is, and I'll just give you an example because I think those can sometimes be helpful in terms of the illustration. When we deployed our technology in the emergency department, what we learned is that when our technology is the most impactful, our staff has the least capacity to hand it out. So Monday through Friday, 4 to 8 p.m., the emergency department is flooded. People just come pouring in. The doctor's offices are closing. They're cranky. They're in pain. The nurses are running around and they can barely breathe. And that's when they needed our technology. And so what we implemented was I now have employees embedded in the emergency department and in other floors who hand out the technology at the key time. We didn't need nurses or we didn't need techs. These are pre-med college students who, it's a great opportunity for them. It's a great opportunity to have that technology available. The nurses and the techs can hand it out when they're not busy, but that's when folks are really cranky and grumpy and not scoring the hospital well, right? And that's the chokehold. Yeah. And so we have to figure out ways around process and flow, but you really only do that in a collaborative way, I think.
Well said. Jean?
And,
Karen, go ahead.
Go
Then
ahead,
Jean?
go ahead, Karen.
From a clinical perspective, the reason I do what I do is because I've seen this so many times. I, started out at the bedside at Robert Wood, and I was one of the few nurses at the time where it was told, you had, for the older, like myself, I know I look super young to you, Jeannie. I love you. I graduated nursing school and I was told I couldn't go into a specialty. I had to, go and pay my dues in adult med-surg. And healthcare nurses, found a way to say, hey, no, go into a specialty, learn what you're going to learn and learn it really well. And then when I went to, I started in pediatrics at Robert Wood, and I specialized in one area, and I learned it really well. And then they moved me to ICU, and I learned it really well. I worked in ED, and I learned it really well. I did transport. And so I took this knowledge and I moved to another place, and because I had that foundation of a workflow, which you mentioned, which is so key, of how a patient goes through the ED, deciding whether to go the track of medical surgical unit or an ICU unit, and then when they're in the ICU, they don't very rarely get discharged from ICU. They'll go into a step down, and then from the step down area, they'll go into med surg, and then maybe get discharged, and maybe discharges into home. If you don't understand all these different workflows and what the clinicians are doing and have pain points, what are the physicians' pain points, what's EVS's pain point, all the people that interact with this patient, and we build technology because we hear about something, that's not the way to do it. And so we need to partner, and one of the things that I do partnering with SoCal HIMSS is I look at us as an ecosystem from a vendor standpoint with the hospitals and the skilled nursing facilities and everyone that we touch. It's not us against them. It's all together because the hospitals can't survive without the vendors providing EHR, providing equipment, and we as vendors can't survive without the hospitals. So we have to partner, and I think the more we open up our doors and partner together with the vendors in healthcare and understand the clinical aspects and bring in clinicians, doctors, nurses into those realms and talk to them and say, hey, can I do a walkthrough with you? That's one of the things that I do on a regular basis. I actually go to hospitals. I'll be in Orange County next week doing a walkthrough with a physician. Not that I don't know the physician's world, but I want to know his world through his eyes and how we're going to help solve it at Tiger Tex with them.
Well said. Jean?
I think my colleagues have said it well, and it's not cliche when you think about that it's the people and the process first and then the technology. Dr. Longhurst talked about it with the glucose monitoring when he said there were, 280 data points per day, and how do you put that into the record? The comment, I think, with the person sitting next to me said, you don't, it's way too many. You know, I learned a long time ago that doctors don't want to know what Jean's heart rate is, 365. You know, they just don't. They do want to know before I'm going to have an event. They want to know if something's changed. They want to know the right data points, and they want to have access to it. I have a friend who has 2 twin sons, one going to get his MBA and one his MD. One of the sons said, "Hey, Dad, I met my cadaver today." The other son said, "Hey, Dad, I met my team who I'm going to work with for the next 2 years." You know, so there are some fundamental shifts. I think we're really lucky here in California, Southern California, Northern California. We have some great health systems that are reaching out to the regional and district hospitals. So our leaders, what I've seen from working with Clark and Martha and many of you in the room, is that our leaders are thinking about it, but whether you're sitting in a vendor or a consultant seat or you're actually working in a facility, is there are only so many things that our health systems can get done during the day. And they are all concerned about, unfortunately, money and cost. So how do they bring these technologies forward? How do they really address, you know, the money and cost to keep the good people doing the work and spend their money and their time and their effort on the right things? So it's that whole piece of looking at what makes sense to the mission of the community, and it is quality care, it's engaging patients, it's making sure that, you know, folks like my son who wanted to go see a doctor for a physical, he couldn't get in for 3 weeks. So you know what he said? "I'll take my own money and I'm going to the urgent care with this, and I don't care if I ever go back to that family doctor or the hospital that you picked, because I'm going to college and I'm out of here," and who knows how he's going to treat his family going forward, because like Susan said, she remembers, you know, intimately her son talking what happens. We will remember that, and there are multiple millions of dollars tied to my son's family in the future. We have to think differently, and it starts with the organizational change. I think that's it.
So all of the comments, I think, centered around the term, the consumerization of medicine, and we've all heard that. From a healthcare organization's perspective, there have been lots of good attempts and bad attempts in areas like retail health, telehealth, telemedicine, a variety of different technologies, but only a few examples of really tremendous success tied to those. And I think part of that may be the difficulty we have in healthcare organizations of separating where healthcare we're different. We're treating patients versus these are customers, and customers have demands, and if we don't meet those demands, those customers will go where those demands will be met. So how, for all the panelists, how do we begin to bridge some of that chasm for folks to change the thinking from what has, for many decades, been a physician-centric industry to a patient-centric, or even more so, a customer-centric organization? Help us understand how to do that. I see Mo. Mo is, I love Mo. You can tell he's got 15 different things going on. Mo, would you like to start us off?
His face gives him away.
Oh, man. No poker. Yeah. Actually, I'm really good at poker. Consumerism in healthcare. So I think, you know, it's funny, I was kind of building on what you said. We're left to kind of navigate healthcare from both sides. I was meeting with a physician yesterday, and it was the first time I heard a physician say this, and it really, really hit home. He said, you know, we're not really culturally taught to ask questions. And the reason that resonates so much is when we're sick, all we want to know is answers to questions, and there isn't sometimes an answer. And I think we're going full circle. If you think about healthcare back in 1800, 1900s, up until 1960 and change, it was, you were engaged, you kind of understood what was happening a little bit, right? Or you would kind of research and you would look. There was less regulation. It was really before we kind of gave a degree to it. So consumerism, I think it's all about education, but also about the right tools in front of that person, right? So I think the challenge with consumerism is twofold. It's not that we can't teach people, it's we're also bombarding them with information that we don't know if it's verified, not verified. But I think to me, consumerism starts at a simpler place. Today, when you go visit your doctor, neither the doctor or you know how much anything costs. let's start with basic things. A doctor couldn't tell you how much an MRI costs for you. They don't know. Because they don't know what copay you have. That's not what they handle. They hire people to do that. So I think for me, consumerism starts at a simple step, right? Patients need to be engaged with understanding, hey, I have money and I should be looking at how it's being spent and I should ask questions. And if I ask those questions, it begins to get me engaged and it gets somebody to start looking at it. And I always try to find I love all the innovative stuff we all come up with, and I'm certainly everybody here has and we do, and I always try to go, what's the lowest point? It's always about the lowest point. And today, I think the only other thing that you're not involved with when you pay is your mortgage. It's kind of like the similar thing. That's the only thing where you're so far removed from it. Even in a car payment now, we haggle. We go to TrueCar. We figured out how to kind of game the system, for lack of a better word. And I think that's really important. And as we're starting to see the shift, even into doctors looking at patients and we're trying to put them in the center and value-based care, I still fear that we're not really putting it as a person in the middle. We're now just trying to figure out how to manage it as population health, right? Where I have 240,000 people, I got X amount of dollars, I want to manage it. How does that really help me? Right? And I think the consumerism part to me starts all with just getting the patient to be empowered, and we don't empower the patients. And I think that quote that was mentioned by the last speaker, it was the first thing that we started our company on. The most underutilized people in healthcare are your pharmacist and your patient. Those are the two most underutilized people. How do we empower them? I think that's how you begin kind of this consumerism. And that's, I think, where everybody kind of sees hope with Apple and the connected health record. I actually see it creating a bigger problem than solving a problem because I'm like, we don't have a problem moving records. We have a problem connecting our own internal communications, not the patient carrying around their binder. We have those. Granted, binders are really large. But so I think beginning there, Fitbits and all that did a great job starting. I think starting to understand how things are being paid, asking about your labs, being involved and seeing, hey, I already had this lab test done, speaking up. That's how you begin kind of this consumerism. And allowing people to pick with choices. We don't get choices.
Yeah, good point. Jane, did you have a thought?
Sorry, I don't know. I figured you'd jump in, right?
I usually always do have a thought. I agree with you, and I would add the type of relationship that we want to have is important as well. We want to know, I look at how much does this cost? You brought in, how much does this cost? What do you mean you can't tell me? If I need an MRI, should I go to the center that's 3 miles away? Susan talked about this with, trying to build more in different campuses, and someone asked about, are we going to a campus model? What if I don't want to go to your campus? What if I want to go to the CVS? Can I tell that the urgent care next to the CVS costs, they advertise they have that? What do you mean I can't get that? If I don't have that ability, I may not choose to go to you. If, now today, our healthcare system, regardless of who you voted for, let's all just agree that we studied for the wrong test. So in that, we have to learn what is the new test that we're going to, how do we engage the patients? How do we want to be engaged? And I think if we put ourselves, those of us who are here, those of us who are in this business, we are patients. So are we taking care of ourselves? Are we taking care of our family? Do we want to know how much this costs? We need to demand that. We need to have that voice. Early on we talked about advocacy. It's that relationship, the relationship to money, because you know what? At the end of the day, healthcare is not going to be free, or if it is, you get what you pay for. So, you have to decide what is that relationship you want to have with how much you pay for it or how much you get with what particular provider you're working with.
And let's take an example. I'm going to quick example. So, Amazon for years has talked about getting into pharmacy benefit management. You want to talk about consumerism? That would be a landscape change overnight, right? Traditionally, you change to Walmart because you'd walk in and your optometrist was there, you get your pharmacy there. If Amazon got into this, and the reason they haven't is really pricing. If they get the pricing right, you have Amazon Prime. Just on shipping alone, they're winning.
Yeah.
And the reason I know that, I'm shocked. My brother, you buy diapers on Amazon. I'm like, they're like half the price of retail. That's crazy because they're buying so much of it. And I think that is really where you begin. People start getting, you kind of have to show people, and when you show them, and there's incentive to show. Amazon has an incentive in a different way, which is get membership up, and I need you to order the toilet paper because I make money on it. In healthcare, our incentives are a little bit misaligned still. We're getting much better though, I'd say.
That's a great point. Martha?
No, yeah, I agree. So I would frame it in a slightly different way, and I would say I think we make a lot of assumptions.
Grab that mic, would you?
Oh, sorry. Okay. So I would frame it slightly differently, and I would say that I think we make a lot of assumptions without asking some really good questions, and I think the questions vary by setting.
Yes.
So, I was talking to a friend of mine who was the former CEO of a healthcare system, and he gave me the 3 top questions that they found from a patient experience in their setting, not a system I was from. And I just thought, oh, these are good questions, and they're asking them every time. And they're things like, did our staff promise you something yesterday that we didn't deliver?
Mm-hmm.
So you can fix it before they leave you and they zing you on their, age caps. What would you like us to focus on today? What would you like us to focus on? And what's top of mind for you? So you learn all their priorities as well as any gaps that happened. So asking really good questions, I think, are important in that setting. And then I would say in another setting, one of the things that I learned when I was at HCA when we were a Malcolm Baldrige finalist was something called a customer supplier alignment. And it's sort of predicated on doing business well. You're either the customer or you're the supplier. And how well that relationship works boils down to 3 questions. And you can use it both internally as well as externally. And I will tell you from a deployment standpoint, which I just talked about, I can count on like one hand the number of vendors who ask me these questions. And so if you're a vendor, like write these down, and if you're a healthcare system, make sure you feed the answers to them because things will go a lot better. And they all impact the customer experience. And one is, what do you need from me? Like you make assumptions about what you need, but sometimes it'll be like, I need data from you every week. And these are the departments that need the data. And so by really having very specific questions, you get really good information. 2, what are you going to do with what you give them? And 3, what are the gaps between what you expected and what you received? So you know where all the landmines are. And so I think questions by setting can be incredibly important in responding to that patient experience so that we're very clear on what we need to do. And having an engaged workforce, having the right people in place, then you can wow them. But you need to be very clear on what that is.
Well said. Karen, thoughts?
Sure. That was a thought. To get back to the consumerism portion as well, I tend to choose a healthcare facility sometimes by my emotions. Health is always very emotional. You watch a woman having a baby and, it's the first time that they're able to hold their baby's fingers or, skin to skin. Those are all the things you learn and you see and you're like, oh yeah, that's where I want to go to have my baby. Meanwhile, it's an advertisement, and that's what's enticing you, right? So I think as healthcare professionals and leaders in our marketing groups, we need to market that information that we want our consumers to know. We talk about engaging them with how much does this cost? If we don't teach them that that's something that you should look for, whether you're an insurance agency, whoever you are, to say, hey, come to us, because these are your price breakdowns. This is what things are costing you. It's important for you to know that. As an adult learner, you want to know the why, right? Why should I come to you? We tend to focus in healthcare on just the emotional impact. So consumerism is us thinking as patients, oh, I'm going to go there because, they say they have the best technology and they are the most loving, caring institution. But it may be maybe it's too costly for you. Maybe down the street, as Jeannie said, there is another option where they're just as nice to you, and maybe you can afford it. But no one's taught them that, and everyone is kind of every man for themselves. And I think, we as leaders in healthcare have to look towards our organization and say it's okay if you went to Scripps or you went to UC Davis. We're going to support you. We want you ultimately to have the best care that you can afford. And it's not just about coming to either place because I made you emotionally feel good on TV. So that's my take on some of the consumerism.
Dave, any thoughts?
Well, it's patients come into healthcare for a variety of reasons, whether it's a pre-scheduled procedure that you have to have because you're a certain age. If you cut your finger, you got to go to the ED. If you're pregnant, you go through a long process. So, versus any other industry, people's reasons for engaging with healthcare are different at different points in their life. Now, if you look at patient engagement, patient experience, banks, they throw technologies. Everybody who manages their money, through their bank, through the online, and always knows what their balances are and pays bills through that. How many people actually use the portals, the Epic, GoToCare, and all the different stuff that your healthcare providers provide to you? Very few. I mean, you might try to do it to make an appointment, but people spend all this money trying to simplify and throw technology at engaging patients. Oh, but you have to have a username and a password. I can remember that from my bank because I use it all the time. I may not remember it for my Go to Healthcare account or whatever. So, there's a lot of different things that I look at it from a little different. Engaging patients is, patients have to take responsibility for themselves. From a cost point of view, if I've got insurance, what I'm concerned about is my copay. The fact that I'm going into a provider who might be charging my insurance company 5 times the national average, I really don't care because I never know. It's the whole model is. We were talking at lunch today about treatments, about getting shots for knee pain versus full blown knee replacement versus a cortisone shot to mask the pain versus some shots that actually provide some benefit to you. And the insurance companies are now going, well, we're not going to give you the shots that actually might benefit you because they're more expensive. But then I go, well, what would it cost if I paid for it out of pocket? Well, it's $3,000 per shot. What would it be if I had the insurance company discount? Well, then it's 80% off. Well, what's wrong there? That's where you look at it and go, give patients the ability to get the education, do their stuff, but it's all the things we do should be from helping the patient to better do their own management.
So, Dave, that's a really interesting comment. If you think about the concept of retail health, or what I affectionately like to call sniffy lubes. So, a lot of organizations have set them up. CVS, Walgreens, healthcare organizations have established in the lobbies of office buildings. We've got one just down the street where you can pop in for $35. You don't need an appointment. You can get right in. It tends to be a PA or an NP that's in there, and you can get most routine things taken care of, and you're in and out. In my view, it really is doing a couple of very interesting things. Number one, it's cutting the payer out of the equation. And then number two, it's providing those services in an environment where that consumer is already spending a good part of their day or their week and integrating it into the life that they spend there. Do you folks see that as a growing model, and what will that mean for the payer side of our industry?
Well,
Make faces.
okay.
Mo, you were very good that time.
He's trying to be deadpan. That was his poker face. I'll make a comment on that, Clark, because I think it's Susan talked about a ton of things. I totally agree with her, and I'm going to pick on Scripps a little bit, but you're not alone. So in that, you've got a 20-year plan, and you're building around these campus models.
Yep.
Yet when you look at ease of use, access, when you look at the challenge with the payers, regardless of where it is, doctors should be paid. There are plenty of people out there who would rather, and I know several that I'll choose a concierge because I want to go to the doctor and I want to go to where I want to go. If you can afford to do that, great. If you can't, you have options. So looking at that, kind of that whole state and that ease of use, that's a key model. And even helping, one of the things that I'm kind of passionate about, because I have the horsepower of a Big Four behind me, is to look at how can I help those that I work with. Think about, yes, you've got these bond issuance, you've got this strategy in place. if you need to change the course of that aircraft carrier now midstream and change your 20-year plan, can you invest in different things so that you're really investing in your patient, helping that access, and use that money someplace else? You know, Scripps on the same side, I'll give you kudos. You are partnering with all kinds of folks around the county, the state, across different state lines. Those are the things that consumers want. When my brother got sick and I took him through end-stage cancer care, I wanted the best. I wanted the best that he could afford. He was a Medicaid patient. He was a Medi-Cal patient. But we figured out, because we know folks, how to get him into the UCLA plan. Couldn't bring him down to Scripps. I couldn't do it. But I did get him into a great program. You know, so you want to be able to utilize that when you can, but you also want to be able to utilize that next door. So how can we out there know, as vendors, partners, as employees, how can we know, let's look at that different mindset, that change, and kind of look at that ease of use. And if you see something, I think all of our panelists and our speakers today said, empower yourself or empower your organization.
Yeah.
Say something that, hey, have we done this? Can we change? Bring those ideas forward.
Martha?
I would just say that maybe at the end I'll finally get this.
I'm going to be your fan.
Thank you. So, you know, I think to the extent that the consumers and patients like that and they're using it, it's going to grow. But I don't see that as the only model. I see a variety of different slices occurring. So in my particular marketplace, I live in LA, Providence has a new facility down the street from me, and they bill as an urgent care, but they've got ER level doctors in it. And so that's a really interesting model. And then I'm also seeing freestanding ERs that are, you know, 20 minutes from the hospital, so that they don't get caught up in sort of the. So I think there are going to be more choices, and to the extent that the patients are using them, those particular models will grow. But I don't know that that's the only model that I think is out there.
Well said.
Well, I'll make one last comment, and I'll try and keep this quick too, is that a client that I was working with in the central part of the state, they said that their biggest challenge since reform had come in was not the indigent patient, that it was actually that 25 to 45-year-old patient that hadn't been sick but had been using their ED. And they only came in once or twice a year, and then the next time they came back in, it was back to the ED, because they don't have regular doctors. They don't really think about regular care. They think about, I'm in pain, maybe I'm having a heart attack, maybe I'm anxiety, whatever the reason, but they didn't change that mindset. So their concern was, how do we teach our community to stay away from our ED, to use our other resources, to go to our minute clinics, or to go online to that portal and to use all the tools and all the bells and whistles that we've put in place. So there's an education gap in our communities as well.
Absolutely.
So I want to build on top of this. I don't think we know what we want. That's one thing. Truly, as a consumer, because I think that there isn't one size that fits all. This goes back to the business models. The sniffy lubes, I like that. I think, look, employers that do that, they have a benefit, right? And the benefit is reduction of cost if you're paying for the insurance, and there is a benefit there. But I truly don't think consumers know what we want, first of all, because we've never had an opportunity to have a choice. So now we have a choice, and we don't know what model works. If we talk to most people, not just millennials, if I told you right now you have something on your hand and you have to go to an ED or book an appointment, or you can text your doctor a picture, there isn't anybody sitting up here who can go, I'll take the texting option. But we don't provide that. So you've got payment misalignment, incentive misalignments, and this is where concierge doctors, I think, kind of fill that gap. But even that model, so are the models growing? I'm in your bank, I don't think they're growing. We're seeing more models. I think we're trying to, a lot of people look at how Kaiser's worked, and literally I feel like they disseminate pages of their playbook and then just deploy it out and see what happens to see if we can make it scale. The express clinics have been great from Providence, but at the same time, the numbers, if you look at them, they're like zip clinics and whatnot. I'm like, well, so. I think the Google guys left and started a new primary care thing, and their biggest thing was like, you had this big, huge screen and it showed your body. And I was like, so you decided to rebuild healthcare from scratch and you started by building an office? I'm like, This is exactly like the counterintuitive part to me. So I think that first we have to figure out a model that works, and I'm not sure it's going to be one model. I think that's what's scary to hospitals. And you were talking about payers. I think that there's 3 players in here, the 3 Ps: payer, providers, and email providers are freaking out because what are you going to do? If you're not a specialty, if you're not a Scripps, if you're not an MD Anderson, your model's gonna change. It has to. Either it's gonna be through different business models or not, but today they haven't been able to prove revenue out of those either.
Right.
And I think that's challenging because oftentimes, back to bonds, if profit doesn't come right away, we're not patient long enough to see a model work out. And I think we forget that it takes time. Amazon took 10 years. People just don't see the gap in time. We have to be patient enough for those models. So I think they're all great. And I think that for us as patients, it's fantastic because we can pick. Are they growing? Depends. I think I know a lot of people that have concierge doctor, go to express clinics, and I'm like, can't you just stick with one? It's like, well, but this one, I was driving home, it was right there. It was faster than texting. I was like, okay.
Or the new model, Care at Home.
Care
where
at
the
Home.
doctor comes to you.
The doctor comes to you, which
Sometimes covered by insurance, sometimes not.
well, we're going full circle back to the way we used to provide. Although, now, I don't know, having a doctor show up in my house, I don't know, that's just me. I'd rather text him.
Good point. Karen, Dave, thoughts?
I'll add I agree with everything that my panelists have said. We complain if we don't have choices. We complain when we have choices.
We just complain.
We just, yeah, it's just.
Do you have a pill for that?
So, they're here. It's something we need to try. We complain that the EDs are too full. We have to, start seeing patients, hurry them up out the door. We need another avenue for patients to go somewhere else. So let's, the minute the patient's admitted, we're thinking of discharge so they can go home. Nobody stays for, more than 48 hours, in the hospital. Day 3, we're like, what are they still doing here? At the same time, all the changes that happen, we have to kind of stop and just think, like you said, what does our consumers want? And if we give them some choices, maybe, just maybe, they will help themselves to help themselves. And that's really, the bottom line is we want our patients to be comfortable in whatever setting they choose. If they want to go to that minute clinic and just go behind a blinder, meanwhile you can hear them talking about somebody else's business while you have your shirt over your head getting a flu shot, I don't care. Like, if you got your flu shot, kudos, right?
I've never been in any of those. Now I'm curious.
Now you're
As
curious.
as a
What's going
patient.
on behind the blindfold there?
Gossip. Sounds like a reality TV show right there.
Stay tuned. But, let's just, in my opinion, if it's going to help the patient's bottom line, and just start maybe having some data around that. If we could, start monitoring who's going, how often are they going, are we seeing any decreases, in hospitalizations, decreases in flu-like symptoms over the course of, because now we've had this clinic in this area offering flu shots, then, let's do that. So that's what it's about to me.
I hate to burst your bubble, Karen, but you don't have to lift your shirt up for a flu shot. So
Depends on what.
I would change where you're getting your flu
Is
shot.
that what they thank you, Clark. I learn something from you every day.
Wow.
So let's talk about compliance for a second. So part of the challenge for any healthcare organization is that population of patients that have a variety of ailments. Take the high blood pressure older gentleman who doesn't work out enough and is diabetic. And it's that common discussion around, are you checking your blood on a regular basis? Are you getting regular exercise? Are you eating well? What are the panel's thoughts around tiering for those types of customers? It is not a popular discussion depending on what circle you travel in.
You mean tiering like pricing?
Tiering on pricing. So as those costs elevate, do those patients pay more? And number one, is that a good model? And number two, should we be thinking about implementing that as healthcare organizations and payers?
I think it's a good model if it goes both ways. I mean, the challenge, it's like car insurance, right? Car insurance works based on not the zip code you were born into or your ethnicity, but where you are right now and what kind of car you drive. Now, if you adjust, it should adjust with you, and I don't think even car insurance adjusts with you, except if you have Allstate, based on their commercials, for the customers, so I don't know.
And they're marketing to you.
The marketing's working really well. But I think this goes back to something, I think it's all about education. So what I love about your product, for instance, is it's the immediate feedback, and I'll give you a story. There was a diabetic that was in a captive care for one of our customers, and they had never been able to stabilize his glucose, ever. 6 years, this guy would go in the ER 8 times a year. Through a course of a bunch of stuff, we actually got him down to never go into the ER room. And it was all about education. We taught him the banana you're eating in the morning is screwing your numbers, right? When you have a birthday and you have a cake, how to limit it. It got to the point that he would call the call center and say, hey, heads up, it's my birthday tonight. I'm gonna eat like crazy, but I'll handle it tomorrow. And I think it comes down to education. So I think, and the reason I bring this up is I think tiering's okay if it creates a movement for somebody. Meaning I don't know, everybody here would react differently. I don't know if I told you if I'd penalize you if it would help or not. But if I have a chance to lower it and improve it, great. Now we're down to one other challenge, which is willpower. The reason people are not in compliance is all about willpower. So the question now comes down, how do we help with that? Is there coaching we can offer? So it's not just about gouging the price and just saying, okay, you're on your own, we're gonna keep increasing the premium. I think in that scenario, it becomes a very downward spiral. You gotta help people. So I think tiering can work, but we have to have guardrails too. It can't just be that they're making money without offering help. So if you're charging me more, I want a full-time coach, literally, until my life changes, right? I mean, I think that there has to be give and take between how that works. Yeah. Anyway, that's such a big topic because then you get into European, like when you think about how they do it in Europe, and I mean in Europe, if you're 55 and get diabetes, it's like, hey, good luck. Here's some pillows. Eat well. If you want anything more, private medicine. I mean, this is what's scary about a single payer that we don't talk about. Yeah. Right. So, interesting topic. But.
Other thoughts?
Comment?
Yeah.
Well, and
Is that a question?
you know,
She agrees.
Clark, in some fashion, we do have tiering today, because when you look at high deductible plans, and you know if you're not in a position to where you can be on the exchange or be covered, if you don't have a work plan where you can choose your coverage, then those folks that are somewhere in the middle. We still have, for those folks who don't have anything, in the United States, you have care, and you have access to care. But those folks in the middle, they're kind of tiered. And I've been there with my family. We've had a, $12,000 deductible per person. Well, let me tell you, if my son caught a baseball in the face, I was gonna pay for it. Yeah, if I didn't feel good, I probably wasn't going to the doctor and I didn't need my annual physical. You kind of get in that mindset when you're in that, because I'm not going to hit the 12 grand.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to pay $2,500 to go figure out that should be eating better. I shouldn't go to McDonald's. So it's the challenge.
This
we're
is
in.
something I don't think people realize. We have been going to a tiering model for a long time. And I think while we're all focused on the Senate bill, all these high deductible plans that I was thinking of, I mean, this is the difference between the exchange and the high deductible plans. On the exchange, it was expensive, but there was no deductible. That's the difference.
That's a good point.
And that's why they're all leaving. And I don't think people, so I only offer a high deductible plan in our company, and we have Kaiser, but we teach people on the savings and we put money into it, because if you don't, one thing, you'll pay for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, very interesting that nobody talks about this anymore. And I think it's something that's becoming a larger issue than people have seen. And every year, last year to this year, I saw a 3% increase in deductible. The gap is increasing. It's not getting shorter.
Yeah.
So how come we're not talking about that? And I think that's a very interesting topic that's kind of gone sideways a little bit. We used to talk about it more. Yeah.
Other thoughts?
No, I agree. I think there's variations of the same model that's gone on in healthcare for years. Being behind the scenes, if you're lying ill in the hospital and you need an organ to be donated to you, you need a lung transplant. Were you a smoker? Were you just happen to have been gotten cancer just for the environmental reasons? And so, there's that ethical debate about what's going on and who gets it and who doesn't get it. The person that smoked, they didn't take care of themselves, so they shouldn't get it. They shouldn't have that chance. Or this one's older, this one's 35, and they're in the prime of their life. Meanwhile, the 55-year-old, maybe he can go. So I think, we're making some ethical decisions when we start thinking about who gets what around here. And I don't have an answer for it, but I would just like everyone to think about some of the ethical resources and reasons behind some of the financials that people are thinking. And you're playing with anyone's life. Everyone is just as important. The person next to you is important. I walk into a patient's room, he may have been the drunk driver that, killed someone, but I'm here to take care of that patient. I'm looking and focusing on that person. And so I think sometimes we're caught up in the dollars and cents of financials and who gets what and who doesn't. And the bottom line is it's still a patient. So it's kind of, sometimes I feel we talk out of both sides of our mouth, where we're patient-centered, or how much money is this really costing me? So just kind of think about those processes. I know I'm going to read it sometimes, right? But I think if we think about that and how we want to be as human race and move forward, I think that's my thought on those.
Well said. I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask.